Hey friends, it's Brett back with another episode of Seeking Our Spirit. Another great episode for today, episode 44, I believe, with a new friend of mine, Laura G. We had a great conversation, a lot of fun. She was coming to us from Portland, and so yeah, had a good time. Hope you guys enjoy it. As always, if you want to be on the show or support the show, contact me at seekingourspirit@gmail.com. That's also how you can inquire and set up spiritual direction with me. Or if you just want to be on the show, not in an interview, but share a story with us, you can call and leave a message with your story at 615-933-9737. I'd love to have some of those so we can talk about them, air them on the show, or talk about them on the show. So that would be great too. Keep bringing me folks, sending me names of folks, come on the show for interviews. And as always, hit the like buttons and subscribe buttons and share the episodes around. Appreciate all the love and support. And all you folks out there who have subscribed in support as well. That helps us a whole lot. So really, really appreciate it. But yeah, enjoy, and we'll talk to you soon. Cool. All right. So we're rolling. Good morning and welcome, Laura. It's good to have you with me this morning on this kind of continued journey of exploring spirituality. And as I just said, I'm honored always to have folks come on who I've never gotten to meet before and who are willing to come chat. So good to meet you, and thank you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, thanks. Shout out to John Montori just for hooking us up, and note to anybody who listens to this, you should do the same and come on to this, or send me the folks that you would love to have on. So why don't we just dive right in, and Laura, just tell us a little bit before we get into sort of spiritual journey stuff and what that looks like in your life. Tell the good folks who you are, what you do, where you're from, all that, just kind of bio.
Yeah. So my name's Laura. I am currently living in Portland, Oregon. I've kind of lived all over the place. John and I actually went to high school together. It's how I know John.
Oh, nice.
And that was in Connecticut. But yeah, I've been in Portland, Oregon for like 27 years now. So it's my home.
Yeah.
And right now I am a therapist intern. I'm about 6 weeks away from a master's in social work. So just kind of wrapping things up with that, and then I could just continue to be a therapist.
Yeah, cool. Congrats. That's exciting.
Thank you. I know it's very wild time right now, being like this close. I'm ready to be done. It's not quite done. The senioritis is real.
It's a real thing.
But also it's like really exciting to just kind of shift careers at, an older age. And so I'm just doing the thing. My specialties are pretty much trauma and grief and loss. But I work with teens and adolescents and adults. And yeah, that's kind of the basics.
Man, that's great. Trauma and grief and loss. Those are I could use some of that guidance there. That's wonderful. I mean, that's real work for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so anything else in terms of bio, just in who you are?
I don't think so. I think that covers it, but I'm sure more will come out.
Yeah. So why don't we just dive in terms of your spiritual journey, whatever that word means to you, and however you describe that. Kind of, I guess I know it's a big, broad question, but when you think spirituality in Laura's life, where do you enter into that? Where is your first kind of awareness of what that is or means?
Yeah, great question. I spent a large part of my childhood road tripping with my family in a camper. And so I have been to many national parks and seen like just beautiful majesty of nature. And I think that's something that has been kind of not only instilled in me, but just as a part of me.
Yeah.
I'm just very connected to nature, and I feel spirituality in that. That being said, I don't think I knew really how to, like, have the words for that as a small child.
Mhm.
And then, when I was around probably 8-ish, 7 or 8, um, my mother joined a church. My mom's always been fairly religious, and it was Episcopalian church, so I kinda grew up in the Episcopalian church. Um, yeah, which I think, in the realm of, like, religion, religious sects or what have you, like, that one feels like a kind of a nice cushy it's a cushy one, right? Like, there's not a whole lot of shame and guilt and whatnot kind of baked in, which I know that there is in, like, other
Yeah.
religious things. And so that was cool. And also my mother worked at a nonprofit that rented space out of that church. And so I mean I like grew up literally in the church, like
Yeah.
like in the building.
Yeah, the way like a priest child would. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah, my mom was always there. If it wasn't work, we were like doing the soup kitchen or otherwise volunteering or doing other things. I was an acolyte. I loved the choir, I just loved singing. However, all of those things were basically just to, like, fulfill a mom obligation. So, like,
Mhm.
my brother and my dad would just refuse. They're very much, like, very not into that, and so, mom was like, "Oh, come with me," and I was like, "Okay." Um, I would make her bribe me with Burger King breakfast sandwiches, as a child, like, that was what got me to church,
Good play.
and
Yeah.
yeah, um and then, I did all the things, right? Like I went through all the motions, I jumped through all the hoops and like the trainings to be an acolyte and like all of it to me just really felt like going through the motions. It was not connecting to me in any way.
A surface
Um,
level. Yeah.
Very surface level. I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, I guess this is what it feels like to be religious. Like it just didn't like gel.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of ended up being more about community, which I think is frequently how people wind up
Mhm.
in church, right? Like, it's a community. Um, and so, yeah, I ended up leaving the church when I was around, 12 or so. Just kind of started noticing there was, at this point, had moved and we were in a different church altogether from the one I grew up in. And that one felt a little bit more kind of judgy, a little uptight, kinda like there was just a lot of discomfort for me in that space, and I don't know if I can even
Also an
fully.
Episcopal church or
Mhm,
oh,
yeah. So such a like, a wildly kind of different experience between those 2 churches, and, like, complete this was in the Midwest, so, like, totally different geographical area, um, and I just got yeah, they fired our youth pastor. And I don't know necessarily all the details behind that. From what I understand, though, it was just because we watched movies, that some parents were, like, really upset about, and that really bothered me.
yeah, that Monty Python stuff, it's real. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it was, like, not yeah, like, it was, like, such innocent stuff, and there was, like, nothing, as far as I knew, like, nefarious
Yeah.
about that person. I maybe don't know all the details, I admit that, but either way, like, I felt really like, "Hey, I felt injustice about it,
Mhm.
and if there's something I just, like, can't deal with, is injustice or unfairness."
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, that really bothered me, and I was really, like, had a heart to heart with my mom, and I was like, "I don't think this place is for me." And I appreciate that she was really supportive of that.
Right.
So, she continued, I didn't. And then I became a teen mom. So I had a baby when I was 16.
Oh,
Um, I kind of ended up getting, like, sort of railroaded back into that world of just like, "Hey, you need community and you need support," and that was an incredibly traumatic experience for me, so I was, like, not even there. It
yeah.
was like, "Sure, we'll do a baptism, we'll do the thing," like, again, it was just, like, going through the motions. It didn't
Yeah.
connect to me. It just was like, "Here's a thing you do." Like the obligatory religion
Yeah, sure.
felt weird to me.
But what about internally? Like, I mean, that just seems I mean, I'm sure we could do a whole episode on that, but
Right?
I can't imagine I mean, I feel like I'm still trying to wrap my head around as a parent, like being a parent, and I can't imagine that at 16. Did, was it just pure blur because you're just in survival mode, or do you?
A lot of it, yes. I mean, the so my child's father,
Yeah,
biological father,
yeah.
is was very abusive. I was in an extremely high lethality abuse situation. And so coming out of that trauma and then also just like becoming a parent when I was still a child, yeah, I don't think I was in my body. Like, I think the trauma was just so intense. I was like dissociated for years.
Okay.
Um, which now I have the words for that,
Right. Right.
like knowing that that's what it was. But yeah, at the time it was a lot of like shame.
Hmm.
There was a lot more shame about like me being a pregnant teen than there was about like a man being abusive, or
Wow.
like all of the shame kind of fell on me for that. And I really internalized it.
Yeah.
um and so I think that all of those things just really, I was like, this never really did jive with me, and now I feel like, no, it just didn't feel good.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that was kind of the end. Since then I've been to churches because I like dig a big cathedral. As John would say, I will lick the stained glass windows.
Like a
But
new term was coined in that statement.
I know.
Yeah.
But the space itself, like, beautiful. I love that. But I don't go unless it's for a wedding or a funeral generally, and I don't really know very many people in my life now who are, like, really religious, who are, like, regular churchgoers. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the Cliff's Notes of it, as far as the church part.
Hmm.
But I'm an incredibly spiritual human. I
Hmm.
feel very deeply connected to my ancestors. I feel so connected to, like, earth, nature, planets, like, all of the things that kind of, like, are natural wonders.
Yeah.
And that's where I tend to find the most kind of connectedness to spirituality.
Yeah, great. That's a great summary. I mean, there's so many things there just to sort of comment on. I mean, one, just kind of for listeners, I did want to you named very well the distinction in denominations, and the Episcopal Church is this weird, as we say, kind of middle way, and instead of it being based on doctrine or dogma, like you must believe this, it's sort of like come and do this with us,
Yeah.
and so that makes the whole experience very different. But
Mhm.
then some of the downside, I think, is as a result, a lot of people in that church culture can sort of, I mean, it can be a good thing or a bad thing, but there's not a clear path, so you can sort of waver or wander. And then I also see it's cool the connection you made in, you know, um, feeling some sense of spirituality in creation and nature, and then also how that's not in my mind in some way that's not totally different or disconnected from like you said about being in a sacred space in a cathedral or something, like that art, that expression of beauty. And so that's, so just, I don't know, just naming a couple things there. And then the
Mhm.
other thing that's interesting is I feel your naming or your life in that journey has um, well, it points to what I think is increasingly common in our culture, in like in our generation and probably younger, though maybe that ebbs and flows of like, it's very common to say I'm spiritual but not religious. Um,
Mhm.
and so, yeah, just sort of like divorcing or separating those two, and even one understanding that they can be separate, is, I think it's a good thing.
Mhm.
Um, I frequently also observe. I mean, I was a cradle Episcopalian and grew up in the church, and um, I frequently comment on how I didn't understand the value and perhaps the spirituality in the community. When I was a
Mm.
kid, I didn't see that. I see it later. I see it now, that importance. But anyway, so just sort of responding to some of the observations. But yeah. Well, so okay. So then in your spiritual life, in the areas that you've explored or that have fed you, that you felt connected to,
what does that look like?
So things that really like fill my cup, fill my heart, um, are like I said, like being in nature, um, psychedelics
Mhm.
have been very fascinating journey to be on. I definitely have kind of experimented with that
Yeah.
in a variety of ways. Also live music, um,
Yeah.
or any expression of art. I'm really obsessed with like theater and art, visual art, movement art, like all of the art. I feel very like connected to that as kind of a spiritual
Yeah.
process. Um, and yeah, it's funny because I keep seeing this meme that's like, I thought I was like really feeling the presence of God in church, but then I just went to a concert and I felt the same way.
Yeah.
And like, is it church or is it like just that, right? And I don't know if it even matters, like whatever gets you there, right?
Yeah. And
Uh,
and so like what is that? Do
right. Like,
have you ever tried to explore like what that is? I agree with you totally. I mean, I music's a massive part of my life. I guess I could say a musician. I mean, not I grew up playing music in bands and that kind of thing, and have always live music has always really been important to me, and music in general. So I hear you. Um, but yeah, like what do you think that is? Like what is I love the
it's
comparison of like what because what we're doing especially in a liturgical church like the Episcopal Church, it is sort of like, hey, we're cultivating an experience
mhm,
using the smells and the sights and the sounds and the movement,
mhm,
all of those things, right? And your participation in it. And so it's not unlike going to a festival or going to like, like a
mhm.
jam band experience, something like that. Yeah. But I
Yeah,
don't know what that is at the heart of it. Well, I'm sorry.
I said I've had lots of jam band
Yeah.
experiences actually.
Uh-oh,
Um,
uh-oh. Now we gotta take a little diversion.
are we
So
gonna
you gotta
detour into
tell
jam
me.
bands?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, so what are your favorites? What have
Oh gosh. It's funny, I'm a little bit out of that scene now, but
Sure.
I've seen Fish, I've seen the Grateful Dead, like Jerry.
Yeah,
I went on tour with Further Tour and went to like all of them. And I've seen String Cheese Incident probably 25 plus times.
yeah,
I flew to Amsterdam to see Jam and the Jam, which was like a whole jam band thing there. It used to be a very big part of my life.
yeah. Oh,
I've sort
kindred
of veered
spirit.
away from that a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a whole other thing to explore,
It
but
is.
I also
It
have an
is.
incredibly eclectic music
Yeah.
taste.
No, that was just
Um,
my personal interest there. Yeah, I'm currently very sad because Fish is playing in Las Vegas in the Sphere,
The
and I'm like,
Sphere, I've been watching yeah, I've been seeing videos of that, and it's like, wow, that place was literally built for a Fish show.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
can't think of a more perfect environment.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's so cool. What so but I still though, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here and I'm thinking out loud
oh,
even in this question, but I really
yeah.
am. I do a lot of thinking about this, like that, okay, like that what what liturgy is aiming for, or
Mhm.
what we're pointing to, and what like a show, a music is aiming for. I can't even define like what is that thing that happens to us there,
Yeah.
or in good art, is it the
I have some
is it the
ideas.
realness, you know?
I think it's, like, authenticity.
Yeah,
I personally, like, can't be I have to be authentic, like, I can't pretend to be something I am not to my own peril a lot of the time, but I think that's part of it. It's like you pour your heart into your art, right? Like, it's such a piece of your heart space, and I think connecting your heart to someone else's heart space is so powerful,
yeah,
and I feel like that's totally happening in church, right? Like,
yeah,
I think there's that. I
when it's
also think
done
it's
well,
just right, exactly, right, like, it's not like every time I, like, hear music, I'm like, "Oh my gosh," like, "This is so spiritual," but there are just some really magical moments,
yeah,
and then I kind of have a thought too about just like you were saying with the liturgy of you're incorporating all of the senses into it.
Mhm.
And then like just from like my therapist brain pops in and I'm like, that's all tapping into your nervous system.
Yeah.
Right. And so like we have very specific things tied, like scent and memory are so closely connected.
Mm.
And you know, when we're in spaces where there's a routine, there's like a ritual or a pattern that we know we can sit in, that can be very stabilizing to our nervous system.
Yeah.
And I think there's a big element of that too, right? Like our
Yeah.
little lizard brains, I'm a neurobiology nerd, but like our little lizard brains inside are kind of the ones that are always like searching for threats, external threats, perceived, whether they're threats or not.
Mhm.
And when you're in spaces where you are feeling connected, you're feeling community, you're feeling like safe and social, that is like just cream of the crop for your nervous system. So I think that that's some of it too, from
Yeah.
like the
And
basic brain chemistry level.
yeah, well, and you would know more about this than I do, but I think that it's not only that our brains are always looking for or being aware of fear or threats, but also
Mhm.
always searching for connection and meaning and those
Yeah.
patterns. And so yeah, when something lines up, that's yeah, it sort
Yeah.
of feeds us in a
Mhm.
primal kind of way. Um,
Absolutely.
you're
And
making
pleasure-seeking beings, right? Like, even just as a matter of, like, food or, like, our basic needs, right? It's all pleasure-seeking ultimately.
mm,
Um, and I think that's all connected.
yeah, you're making me also think of you know, we well, it, well, one, I just want to say as an aside, you mentioned like psychedelics or hallucinogens, and it's a really
Mhm.
interesting time because I think many people have suspected this, or we sort of knew this, like in terms of I don't know, like in seminary and scholarly work, like you learn about well, what was the community of John doing out on that island, and why
Right?
were the writings of John in particular so sort of esoteric? And we're finding, and so it was sort of hush hush back then, but now it's becoming more and more known with like archaeological evidence that um, plant medicine, if you will, um, seems to have been or played a very important role actually in early Christian worship. I know some might not like to hear that, and some might be offended by that, but it's I suspected that, and it's becoming now backed by a lot of our findings, which is fascinating.
That is really interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have not heard that.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
I didn't think about that, and that's very cool. And it
yeah,
makes sense. I mean, when you think about, like, shamanic traditions and, like, indigenous traditions, like, plant medicine is integral to that.
hmm
And I think kind of one thing that, like, I guess is sort of like a bummer, for lack of a better word, about, like, the church, like, Christianity as a whole, is it's really, like, taken a lot of that out of it, right? And it's a lot more about fear and shame
hmm
in a lot of cases than it is about, like, discovery, connection, like, you know, I just feel like the church kinda, like, rolled in and took over a lot of the, like, divine feminine and a lot of the other, like, kind of more natural
yeah,
elements of things,
yeah,
and then, you know, like, the Catholics were like, "Oh, hey, guess what? You have to pay us if you wanna not go to hell," you know, like, things like that, like,
uh,
it's always gonna get exploited, right?
yes,
But I think that is part of the origins of it, of just, like, we're
yes,
connecting with the planet that
yes.
we exist with so many magical plants.
Yeah, well, and it's so it and this is a big conversation, but like
Totally.
you can go deeper into that in terms of, okay, like you take Christmas or Easter and you take these symbols that we have, and people eventually learn like, well, half of these things are
They're
leftovers from more quote unquote pagan kind of
yeah,
worship and awareness. And I
yeah,
think most people think in terms of the church intentionally took those to try to reclaim them. But
yes.
I think an alternative is also possible where there's a recognition of the importance of those
Mm,
realms,
I
at
like
least
that. I like that
in a
reframe.
liturgical sense, right? Because
Yeah,
those things are not very different.
right.
Following the seasons of creation is not very different than what we do in a liturgical church of going
Right.
through these seasons.
That's
Um,
true.
and
Yeah.
so I don't know. I don't think that those things necessarily have to be like separate or seen in a negative light.
Yeah.
Um, it also makes me think about how um, the well, before I forget, that authenticity that we're naming in art, in music, in church, which I fully, I mean, I can't, not to get into my story, but I did not want to be a priest and was horrified of being in front of people and all that. And the only way I made peace with that is like the only way I could actually, and still to this day, can speak anything to a group of people is by trying to tap into my most authentic self and being as honest and open and vulnerable as possible. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
can't do it. And so I think I think you're right. I think that's what connects with
Yeah.
people, just looking for the real and the authenticity.
Kind of
Um,
stripping away all those layers of noise and other things to really just get at the meat of it, the heart of it.
mhm. Um, and the other part that you're making me think of is there's another element or piece in what we're talking about of culture and society. I don't know, you might have some insight on this in from a psychological perspective, but there's another part of it seems to be part of our DNA that we need ritual, that we need things that mark, set aside things and mark it. You know, take just the classic like um uh, journey to adulthood, like becoming a man, becoming a woman, these ceremonies, which
Mhm.
today have become it's very watered down, I would say,
Yeah.
compared to what we know of what it used to be. But
Mm.
I think that what we see in the church today is a leftover from what used to be a very clear understanding of the importance of that. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. Yeah. No, I can see that. And I think about that in terms of like the birth and death cycle. Um, I'm very connected to death work and like grief and loss. And that's really my wheelhouse and it's I think part of it's because I can deal with it. I
Hmm.
can sit in that discomfort and really like witness. Um, and something that we do and I think just as far as ritual or like sort of watering things down, I think about like funerals and just like the death industry, right? In our culture it's so watered down, everyone's so terrified of it. We don't say someone died, we say they passed away.
Yeah.
And and then there's like there's just so much like sanitizing of this very visceral raw thing.
Preach, sister. Yeah, I deal with this all the time.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and then also I think about with the, spiritual bypassing. Are you familiar with that?
Say more.
So, if you're like, "Wow, I am really devastated that my dad died," and someone's like, "He's in a better place now.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
praying for you." Like,
Yeah.
cool, that does not help my grief in any way.
Yeah.
Um, or the like, God doesn't give you anything you can't handle. It's always just this like toxic positivity. So that's a real thing called spiritual bypassing. And it's like, I'm so uncomfortable with your pain
Mhm.
that I'm going to just block that all out and be like, I'm gonna pray for you. And then
Yeah, which increases the trauma, right? Increases the
absolutely like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, yes.
Oh man, you're preaching to the choir because like I can just name a million things like the and I do this because it's uncomfortable for the people, but like, take the burial service in the Episcopal Church. It's called burial of the dead. you know, but what do we do in the bulletin? We change it to a celebration of life. And
Right.
you're like, no, we need to sit in this grief. We need to do
Yep.
this thing together. Or like,
Definitely.
it bothers me to no end that, and you mentioned like sort of the financial system that goes into death. Um,
Yes.
Nowadays, you go to a funeral, or I lead a funeral, and if we go to the graveside or do an interment of ashes, if if I don't have sole responsibility for it, the funeral homes will not even, they'll do everything in their power to get you out of there before they need to like lower the casket or do any of that. Where like the traditions of the church are, you stay and you watch that go into the
Yeah.
ground, and then you take a shovel and you throw dirt on that, and you,
Right? They give you a little salt shaker now.
I have to request that. I have to ask them even for that. I'm like, can I get
Wow.
some dirt to at least put that on the coffin and bless? And so
Speaking of sacred spaces, right? We're just like, we don't want to deal with that sacred space. That makes us really uncomfortable.
yes, and that's the whole like yeah, see, like the church has that in it at its heart, and we've watered it down.
Right.
I feel certainly like Jesus was. I mean, just look at crucifixion and stuff. Like that's one thing the Catholic Church really, I think, still gets.
I
Is like,
agree.
look at this body on the cross. Like take
Yeah.
that in, or you take like Mel Gibson's The Passion. Like that's rough, but it's
Right. It's
let's
gritty
yeah,
and
let's
messy. You're in the muck of
yeah.
it all, and that's how it goes. And so I think when we water all that stuff down, we don't really get that, like you just to tie it back to you being like, these rituals of the seasons of our lives and the seasons of the years and like transitions into new phases of our lives.
Mm,
It all gets very I feel like it's either watered down or weaponized.
yeah,
Like
for sure.
and there's not a whole lot of stuff in the middle, or at least that's the most like vocal and loud
Yep.
um,
And it
of
all
it.
becomes pretty, I call it the Church of Paul. Like it all becomes like, oh, I believe this, so it'll all be pretty and good in yellow brick roads in the end,
Yeah.
and I just
Oof.
gotta wait for God to put it back right.
Yeah.
Takes all the
Oof.
responsibility or lived experience out of it.
Right. Like that's just not how it works.
Mhm.
It's from in my opinion anyway.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, so I think that that is something that's so important is to really like get in there, feel the dirt, scream like an Italian widow, feel that grief. And then that's the other thing too, like grief was never meant to be something we face alone.
mm,
It's done in community.
mhm,
That's why grief groups are so good for people who are grieving because it's like just a community of people supporting each other in their grief.
yeah.
Um,
It's a sad irony in the church because it's like that's the one place where that's supposed to be going on, and if people aren't
uh,
unable to be authentic and real together and sit in their grief together, I mean the Jewish tradition still has a great right. I think is it
Sit Shiva.
Shiva, yeah, and that's yeah, that's
I mean,
great.
it's a real honoring and yeah, I mean, I just think that's so important. And I think that is the celebration of life, right? Like burial of the dead.
Yeah, I much like you said in different words. I mean, I frequently say as a priest the most holy things, without a doubt, the most holy moments I've ever experienced have been in death.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
yeah, I would love to hear more about that. Now I'm the podcast host. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't know I can give you much more. It's just a recognition that like
Yeah.
it's painful and it's hard and it's not
Mhm.
fun, and it's not like I wanna go do it. I don't find joy in it, but it is so authentic and real to be in those moments with people. It's an honor, and
Yeah.
it's completely holy. Yeah, I mean, that's probably about all I got there, but, uh,
Uh,
you were how I lost it, it'll come back to me, had another thought, but so for you then, in terms of like God and what is God or creator or source or however we want to talk about that, do you have any kind of system you ascribe to in that, to approach that? Do you have practices or disciplines? Do you have anything that your life path took you down on?
yeah. Um, I have a very regular meditation ritual. That's like I have to do that almost every day just for my brain and body, my nervous system being happy. And that really, I guess can be kind of considered in the spiritual realms. I have an altar for my ancestors. I incorporate photographs of my family members, my ancestors, my loved ones. There's candles, there's like death imagery, there's feathers, like it's all, I incorporate a lot of nature into that.
Mhm.
And that space, like I talk to my ancestors every morning. I get up and really just kind of like connect with that. Um, I really connect with like visualizing the like the negativity and the self-shame and the all the negative self-thoughts and all those things really just like go through my body and exit out my feet and just put them right under the earth. They're just right in there now.
Yeah,
Like, so I sort of have those rituals that I do.
great
Um,
practice.
thank you. Yeah, I also just do a lot of really intentional walking.
Mhm.
So I will like walk around and I'm looking on the ground and I'm like looking in the trees and I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of weird in the surprising ways that you connect with spirituality, whatever that looks like.
No, yeah. I mean, again, you're speaking my language. I mean, um, it's mindfulness, but it's more than
Yeah,
mindfulness. That makes sense.
totally. I like the
I
term intentionality that way because it's mindfulness, but it's like done with specific intention.
Yeah, yeah. Man,
Mhm.
I use that word all the time because I feel like when you boil down a lot of what, at least I feel like I'm talking about in religion and spirituality, intentionality is everything.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Man, gosh, you're making me just preach today with this stuff. But like, I mean, I feel like what you just said is what I'm saying. I feel like that's what Jesus was saying all the time. Like,
Yeah.
kingdom of God is at hand, or the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Not that it's coming, it's right here.
Right.
So like,
Right.
if you are intentional about it and you are mindful and you walk through your life
Mhm.
in that way, everything is holy. You know,
Kinda, yeah.
everything is spiritual, right? It is that lived experience.
Yep, and it's interesting how, like, um, just in your day-to-day, like, I will just start noticing, and so sometimes it'll be like, every time I look down, there's a quarter on the ground.
Mhm.
I go through these feather phases. Everywhere I go, there's feathers. Like, no matter what happens, I look down, there's a feather on the ground. Like, I just feel like those are things that I notice.
Mhm.
I don't know what they are or why they're there or whatever, but the fact that they're there feels relevant to me in some way.
A little nod
And
from the
so
universe.
yeah, like, I kinda think of it like that.
Mm,
Um, and then I totally forgot what else I was gonna say to your point, but I had
okay.
another little juicy nugget, but we'll get there.
It'll come back. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was gonna go back and dig and maybe this will come back to you, but like, so this meditation practice that you engage in, is it more around like you described, like examining shame, guilt, things like that, and sort of processing and putting it through, or is it more of a mindfulness practice? Like, what is that?
It's all of it. So sometimes it's really I'm a big vibes gal. So like just like how am I feeling? Let's just listen to that.
Mhm.
And so sometimes yes, it is really like no, like all this negativity, all of these things, my imposter syndrome, like all that stuff. We're just going to let it go today.
Mhm.
Or we're going to let it go for this moment. It's some of that. Some of it is really literally just like brain science of like settling my nervous system, breathing, um, sometimes it's really just, like, sitting with my thoughts if I can't get them out. Maybe there's, like, something else there. And then I also, like, almost every day pull a tarot card or an oracle card
Mhm.
and find that to be very interesting and, relevant a lot of the time. So if I
Mhm.
pull a card, I usually find that it's in some way connected to, like, what's happening for me. And I think that helps me kinda just bring the intention back, so I can carry that stuff with me the rest of the day.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Um,
hear
yeah.
awareness in that, right? And I hope, I love that you engage in such a practice, but what really strikes me is just um being, well, the recognition of the importance of being aware of your thoughts and feelings.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
how many people just go through life without
So
any consciousness around any of that?
many. It's
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
yeah. And it's sort of the similar discussion around death. It's like, if we just shove all that away, don't
Yeah.
recognize it and don't process it, it is, I mean, I hate to overuse that word, but it is traumatic. You're not dealing with things,
Oh
and
yeah.
just like death, instead of facing it, living it, dealing with it, and then you're better, you know? Um,
Exactly.
mhm.
Exactly. And I think like, similar to death, we don't need to sanitize trauma. Trauma is real. We all have it. We all experience it. A lot of people experience it from religion,
Yeah,
very
I know. That's
specifically, right?
big learning for me. Yeah. I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
realize that.
Like, yeah, I mean, there's an entire specialty in therapy around religious abuse.
Mhm.
And that's real, real. Two of my like closest friends grew up in really like high control religious cult kind of experiences. Um, and so I think that's where I get hung up is it's so hard for me to separate just like as a feminist, as an advocate for humans, and someone who like works with very traumatized people. Um, it's so frequently like it's just really hard for me to separate the toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, the like controlling of women, controlling of bodies, all of those things that are the loudest, like, oh, I believe in God, so trans people should die. Like, like those, I can't separate those things
Yeah, sure.
from like religion. And I think that's just, it might be my own personal bias. And I have no beef with like people who adhere to, their faith in some way, as long as they're not like actively using it to harm other people.
Of course.
But yeah, like you don't have to hate to say the word trauma.
Yeah.
It's real. We all experience it. And when we shove it down,
Yeah.
that's when we're like living lives of quiet desperation, right?
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Man. Yeah. Boy, so many angles. That's awesome. Um, so okay. Oh, I was gonna say too, the ancestor part.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just again identifying with you. That I think on the surface, most people in sort of a organized religion, Christian perspective would like balk at that. That has been very natural for me as well. I've always felt very connected to my ancestors, um, just kind of intuitively, and would find myself talking to them, or in a way, I guess you would call that prayer. Uh, Praying to my ancestors, and I don't know. I actually argue with people that, at least in the Episcopal tradition, I mean, that those are elements that are present. We talk about when you share the Holy Eucharist, you're united with not just the people here, but everyone that has ever been. Right, you're united in that
Right.
holy moment.
Yeah.
So I think it is there, but um, what other kind of practices do you have, or well, I'll let you go there first.
Yeah. I'm very regularly in therapy. I think that in itself can be a bit of a spiritual practice. Getting in there, working through the stuff, sort of like finding out what your like self limitations are, like all of those things are so important to me. Like gosh, I totally lost my train of thought. But anyway, that's really valuable. I think other rituals, honestly, being in community with people who I love, just like knowing that I have wonderful people around me, that I take care of them when they need it and they take care of me when I need it. And again, it like just to circle back to what we were saying before, like a lot of people come to church for community. And I think I found that community, but my community is like leftist, abolitionist, like land back, pro Palestine, like
Yeah,
capitalism sucks, like very radical people are the
yeah,
people that I vibe with, which I feel like, Jesus probably would have been a cool hang, like,
yeah.
because he was a radical, right? Like,
He was flipping tables in the temple for sure. Yeah.
exactly. Like, I'm here for that. So,
Yeah, I know. It's one of the things that I like, on a bad day I struggle with in being a part of the church, because I see all of the things you're saying, and yet recognize that like Jesus probably wouldn't be all that pleased with what you know. And
Really, like, love your neighbor.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, and I
you know,
do think the Episcopal Church, at least that flavor of
he's
Christianity, obviously it's different as you named in different places, and every church community is different. But I do think on the whole, it is kind of one of the denominations that is at least more intentional about being open and accepting of everyone and trying to engage in social justice and these the problems of our world and our day. Um,
mhm.
but I admit, and I hope this doesn't come off as arrogant to people. I don't know if I've ever said this before, but one of the ways that I reconciled within myself the sense of call to ministry
Mhm.
was what we're talking about. And it was an awareness of trying to somehow work to change that. Um,
Yeah, okay. I
um,
get that.
I know
That makes sense.
that's probably naive, but it's
I mean, I get that. I think a lot of people go into social work and therapy because they wanna save people or rescue them, or they think they know what's best for them, and, like, none of that is true.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and so I think there's, like, an element of that
mm,
in both sides of things.
mm,
So I see what you're saying there. I also think that, like, um, having people who can understand that nuance in positions of power, I think is important.
mm,
Um, because I think it's so easy to slip into sort of status quo thinking
yeah,
in a church environment.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah, we could do 4 episodes on that.
honestly, right?
I'll leave that. I'll leave that alone. That'll be the therapy you need to give me. But
Yeah.
um, so do you like and the answer to this can be no, but like okay, so you have these rituals, you have these practices, you have an awareness of connecting to something.
Yeah.
Do you care about trying to define or understand, like, is this God, is this what is that part of your
Hmm.
thinking, or or is it just this is my lived experience?
I think it's more that. I don't have like I can't vibe with like a Christian God that's just this like benevolent man in the sky. Like I deal with men all of the time trying to control things. I'm good with that. And so like that's not how I think of it. For me, it is really like my connection, my like tapping into whatever else there is out
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Well, and I
And I
guess
don't
that's what
need a
I'm
name for it, like, or to label it, you
well,
know?
so Brett would call that God. Like I
Okay.
also, I would say this, the guy with the beard in the sky or the genie in the bottle is a
Yeah,
stereotypical and
yeah,
very incorrect, image of God. But
yeah.
I was just curious if that's how, if do you call that thing you're connecting to, do you call that God?
No.
Obviously not in the way that I'm not meaning the common stereotypical, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. No,
I don't care if it's,
right.
to me, God, source, creator, whatever word we use, we're talking about the same
Right,
thing. That word's
yeah.
just a placeholder for this undefinable, unimaginable thing that we talk about. Um,
I think creation
mhm.
versus creator, like, I don't know if it's just this one entity, right? Like, I don't really believe that. And so I think there's so much to it, and I think about, like, animals and trees and like I mean it can be all of those things.
Yeah,
And so yeah, I think for me it's hard for me to adhere to like the one true God. And I think that is a big part of why I was like, "Ooh, Christianity's not really for me," because that's kind of what the vibe is.
yeah,
Um
it's certainly the stereotypical angle that the church has taken. I think that what you're saying, it is also very present in the writings of the church fathers and theology and all of that. It's there. We didn't choose to highlight that aspect. I mean,
yeah, just a real bummer.
it is. Yeah. I personally much more identify with terms like source,
Yeah.
meaning all of creation.
Right.
That somehow that is all. We are all, you and I, all of creation. the universe, all of this is whatever this thing we call God,
Yeah, I can vibe with that.
yeah, yeah. Semantics, a lot of semantics, it's
It is, right? And it's like just it's such nuance, and it's like just kind of the framework that you're pulling from that like your brain connects to, and
yeah.
that can vary so much.
Well, and I
Um,
think that's why these kind of conversations are super important because like people don't have them. And then if you get two people who aren't going to be combative and argumentative about it and just are actually having the conversation, then you discover like, oh, we're at the heart, we're really talking about the same thing. We're just using different language around it,
yeah,
Um,
totally. Makes sense.
but um, okay, well, so anything else there in terms of practices or
Mhm.
perceptions, conceptions about what higher power or what universe is or anything like that?
Um, I think the only other thing, and this might tie into me saying how like I'm intentional in like noticing. I'm always noticing. And I think what happens is I find myself in spaces where I absolutely needed to be. And
Mhm.
a lot of times this is really weird, but like I rescued an old man the other day. Like everywhere I go, someone fell on the ground or something. I'm like that person. And I'm the person who doesn't think, but I just like spring into action. And so like I cannot tell you how many times I've like interrupted a domestic violence situation in the middle of the street, or like I'm just always the person who's there when those things happen. And I feel like that's interesting because I'm equipped to do it,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
yes, I know, and I mean, one of the great pleasures I have in being a priest is I get to know and hear everyone's stories, and it's crazy because the thing that you're talking about, I see in people's lives again and again and again in different ways. It might not be in the version that you're talking about, but
Right.
that same theme. And yeah, that's something weird. I don't know what it is. I mean, obviously, we have words about like, I mean, I hesitate to say like destiny or, these sorts of things, but there seems to be sort of like I don't want to say, I don't know, a track or a journey that people are on. Things are put in people's path
I think about
for
that.
some,
Like for some reason, I was in the same place. Like I am a trained domestic violence advocate.
Mhm.
And, like, it just so happens someone's, like, outside my bedroom window, like, or I'm walking down the street, it's so weird, and I'm like, "Does this happen to other people?" Like
I had this conversation the other day with a friend of mine who's a Marine, and he was I don't know any of that language, but he also was like medically trained as a Marine, and so he can respond to critical situations. And
right.
he was saying the same thing you're saying. He was like, "Oh yeah, you helped in a wreck the other day or whatever, this, that, the other." He was like, and he was asking me like, or he was like asking me to identify with that, and I was like, I've never seen an emergency in my life. And
I know.
he was like, "What?" He was
What?
like, I
I can't
see it
believe that
all the
that's now
time."
seeing.
Yeah. He was like, I've responded to countless emergencies. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like it's somehow people have I don't
Yeah.
know. And
Like, it's
it's
happened to me, like, twice this week.
yeah, I'm not surprised by it. I hear that all the time. Um, it makes me think a little bit about you know, some people in these sorts of conversations, right, about what is afterlife, what is soul, what is spirit, are these things real? You know, and I say this way too often, but there's I feel like no one saw it, but like a Disney Pixar movie called Soul. Um,
Yeah.
you should
I mean,
I mean, so it's called Soul because it's about a soul musician, right? So it's got great,
oh, yes. I did hear about this. Go
yeah.
on.
Well, so it's got
Okay.
great music in it, but it's also about souls. And so um,
Okay.
it very much is that line of thinking of, I don't know if you want to call this whatever label you want to put on this new agey or whatever, but it's more a reincarnation idea of you as a soul, whatever that is, choose the journey or the path or the learning that you want to have in this realm.
Mhm.
And so you choose that. So I don't know. It sort of lends itself to that thinking though of like, I don't know, maybe there is something we're all supposed to be learning in this life, and it's different for all of us.
I mean, that's, like, pretty much the definition of karma.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
idea of karma. Like, you know, people be like, "Oh, karma's gonna get that person," but, like, really, I believe the whole, like, idea of karma is that, like, you learn the lesson in your next life
Mhm.
of the things that you, like, didn't learn in the previous one. I'm pretty sure that's how that works.
Yeah,
Um,
perhaps. Yeah,
and so, yeah, like, that's I think we all do choose our path, whether it's conscious or unconscious.
yeah. It
Um,
is weird though, because I see just in people's stories like that, like what you're naming, my Marine friend. I also see it in terms of it's like there are people in that I counsel with or whatever, that it's like no matter what they do, everything can be it just works. And whatever they touch is and then on the flip side, I have people who it's like they constantly get kicked when they're down, no matter what. No matter what.
yeah.
And it's like, what is this? I don't know.
I
Like,
I mean, I experience that absolutely in my therapy practice too.
it's
Like,
weird,
it's
right?
just like some people, like, just really get the raw end of the deal, and, like, yeah, I don't know.
But
Um,
it almost seems like I don't I'm not saying I believe this, but it sometimes it seems because I'm not sure, but sometimes it seems almost like their journey would or our journeys were like written for us already. It's strange. I
I
don't
mean,
sometimes.
yeah. Like, I really like to believe in free will as a thing, but I think there's, like, an element of that, right? And for me, like, all of that is in a, like, psychological framework,
Mhm,
you know,
mhm.
and I think same with religion, right? Where it's like, I always tell clients, like, "Hey, check out this thing, take what works, leave what doesn't."
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how I, like, live my life and my spirituality. I'm like, "Cool, I really vibe with this one idea," and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a Christian idea or whatever, but, like, just take what works and leave the rest, and I think, like, in some cases, we don't always know that we're able to do that.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, I don't know if that's connected to, like, how some people end up just, like, being in the path of things. You know that famous Mister Rogers quote that's like, "Look for the helpers when things are bad," or whatever, and I'm like, I am that person. I run into the fire. I
Yeah.
don't run away from the fire to my own peril. Like, I get to this, like, I get in this phase where I'm just like, "Oh, I'm invincible." Like, "I'm gonna go interrupt this violent situation."
You go put out this fire real quick and, yeah,
Right? Like, um
disarm this, armed assailant. Yeah.
I mean, truthfully though, like, I have all of that training, right? Like, I specifically have taken bystander training and, like, stop the bleed and Narcan training and, like, all the possible ways, and honestly, like, it's funny, but, like, in psychological circles, we're like, "Oh, we have trauma. We're hypervigilant." So, like, I
Uh,
don't know. Like, yeah, my friend and I, the other day, we're on campus, we're walking to class, and this man, like, fell off a bench. He was an old man, and we, like, just literally without thinking, both of us just ran and,
mhm.
like, grabbed him and uprighted him, and then just, like, went on as though it was just the most casual, like, "Oh, okay, cool, let's go to class now, blah, blah, blah," and, like, it it
Yeah.
didn't even, like, impact, and the third person we were with was just like, "What just happened?"
Mm.
And we were like, "Trauma, hypervigilance, baby."
Yep,
So, I
yep.
mean, it could just be that. I don't know.
Which
But
is a
again,
weird it's a weird thing in and of itself, both with therapists, I mean, it's similar to clergy, like, there's a weird thing that happens I mean, medical professionals, you get accustomed to being in the situations that everyday folks may see once or
maybe
twice
that's
in their
part
life,
of it.
you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that is a part of it. Well, and I was saying that about death work. Like, I'm just okay with it. Like, I'm not as scared of it. You can grieve so messy, you know, like whatever way you need to. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. So maybe that is like you're onto something there. I can
So I'm looking at I cannot believe I feel like we've been talking for 5 minutes, but it's like already
it's
like
already
flown by, which is great. So we're having fun. But so what I always ask, and since the time is already where it is, um, what are some of the or the one main like quote unquote most powerful or significant spiritual experience you've had in your life?
Ooh, that's tough.
Sorry.
The most significant. So here's the thing, like I'm also really bad at picking favorites because I'm like favorite for what?
You can give me as
Um,
many as you want. Yeah.
yeah. Let's see.
Or just
I
name
have,
one.
okay, I have a good jam band one
Okay.
actually.
Okay.
So back in like the 90s, uh, or maybe it was early 2000s, I was on tour and I was in Denver, Colorado, seeing the Further Festival, which was the Grateful Dead without Jerry, basically.
By the
Um,
way, you know, Jerry was Episcopalian.
I did not know that. Are you serious?
Yeah,
That's amazing.
he's buried in an Episcopal church in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, it's St. Stephen's.
Yeah.
Because the song.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's wild. Thanks for that fun fact. I had no idea. Um, but anyway, there's a song called Fire on the Mountain, and they were singing Fire on the Mountain, and behind the stage was a giant mountain and a sunset. And just as the sun like touched the mountains and like lit them behind them, they started singing Fire on the Mountain. And they couldn't have planned it. Like it was just the most perfect, like, oh, moment. And then they did Ripple, which is also a favorite, and that made me cry. But another time, this is a different concert, not a jam band. I was seeing The National at this beautiful venue that we have in Portland that's like got lots of trees and beautiful scenery. And so right above the stage there's a song called Light Years. They're doing the Light Years thing. Just a perfect, like perfect arc above the stage, like shooting star or like a something like something celestial was just like pew like right across the stage. And those are the things where I'm like, see, this is connected. It's connected to a bigger thing that's bigger than us.
Mhm.
And I feel like those are some good moments. um and then like just on a regular basis, I work at a summer camp. I'm a mental health mentor slash consultation person for a summer camp that's in an old growth forest on the Oregon coast. It is truly one of the most beautiful places on earth. Um, and it's a magical space that has supported like literally thousands of people. And every time I get there, the moment I turn onto the road, everything changes. My nervous system settles and I'm just like, yes,
Mm.
this is it. And I feel it in like every cell of my body. And I think part of it is the majesty of that place, right? There's like this beautiful, it's right on the ocean. There's this beautiful beach, mountains, wildlife, like all the good stuff. And again, it's a community. It's that like sharing, that bonding. I mean, church and camp are a big, they're
Yeah.
homies. Like, so like, yeah. And so I think summer camp too, just being in that specific space. I don't know if it's just like summer camp in general, but that one.
Yeah. Well,
I just felt held and embraced by it so incredibly well.
yeah. Well, it almost, I mean, in a way that I feel like some of what you're saying goes back full circle to what we were talking about in the beginning of like real relationship authenticity, right?
Ah,
That's what happens in those places, right?
mhm.
Because people are taken out of there every day. They're in this place and they're more real, they're more vulnerable. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I recently went there. There were no campers. Um, I get to go hang out there, in the off season sometimes. And um, so I went there and took psychedelic mushrooms and like just melted into the earth and vibed with the ocean and the plants and the trees. And that was just like an incredible experience. I'm still like floating from that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think what came to me in that moment was this incredible level of gratitude.
Mhm.
Just this like such deep gratitude for
Everything.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
plant medicine, whatever it is, like, thank you, gratitude. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, so those are
Uh,
a few. I'm
yeah.
sure there are more.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah.
Uh,
I know
but yeah,
it's a hard
it
thing.
is. It's really tough. You know what else though? Actually, So in therapy, it's very pathologizing. It's very medical model. And so we have to jump through these hoops to make insurance companies pay the bills and things like that. And what's happened is, again, it's been like sanitized or watered down that like it's such a spiritual practice to hold space for someone and like sit with their process.
Mhm.
And so, like, I really try to intentionally have it be a spiritual practice. And I don't mean religion, but I mean, again, it's like this authenticity of like being in the space with someone in their most vulnerable moments. And sometimes that looks like just like, hey, let's brush your hair. What do you need that just takes care of your soul right now, you know? And when I'm like constantly resourcing those needs, I feel like I really tap into the spirituality of that work.
Mhm.
Um, and that's kind of a daily thing.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. People, I mean, good on you. People are lucky to have you as a therapist then, because yeah, it's, I mean, it can be so clinical, you know. And, yeah, man, it just, I feel like a lot of what we've talked about today is sort of similar in that, like even
Mhm.
that your mention of brushing hair, like made me think of like how people are starved even for like touch, like how
Yeah.
that can be just like some foreign
Oh my gosh.
thing, you know,
Yeah,
like when's the last time you had a hug? You know, like
truly. And
it's
like,
so
yeah,
sad.
sometimes it's just like, do you just need a hug? And it's shocking how many people are like, oh my gosh, yes, that's just what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I identify with that doing I sort of do spiritual direction both in the church but also on the side in my own. And I
Mhm.
notice with people sometimes I use the same language that you just used. Actually, I see that as holding. I tell them this is just me holding space
Mm.
for you to be with whatever you define as God, and you know, and be authentic and be real. And sometimes it really is. It's not like some big thing. People just, unfortunately, in our society, in our culture today, like have no one to talk to, and they're
Well,
just
yeah, and not only someone to talk to, but someone to see you
talking. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like see you and not be there just for their own agenda or their own, like
Yes, yeah,
I
that's a good
think the two things are so connected.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
distinction. Yeah,
mm,
yeah.
yeah. Gosh, again, I feel like we could just keep talking forever.
Yes.
I have a lot of feelings about all of that, but yeah, I mean, I think it's something that as a radical social worker, uh, I'm like, no, we're taking all this medical junk out of it and like, let's talk about
Yeah,
your spirit and
great.
like what that looks like for you. Um, yeah.
Cool. Um, well, I'm shocked. I don't want to keep you all day, but I'm looking at the clock. I literally feel like we talked for 5 minutes, so this has been a joy.
No.
But is there anything else that you want to name? Just Laura's spirituality, or any other moment you want to point to? I also want to ask: Do you only see clients in person, or do you do remote? Like, do you want to plug? You know, can people find you?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, so I do both, but how licensure works is you can't see people who aren't physically their bodies in the state where you are licensed. So and I'm at my internship and I'm graduating in 6 weeks and then I don't know where I'm gonna land. So
Got
I'm
it.
gonna say no for the moment because I
Not
don't
for now.
really have a thing to plug
Yeah,
specifically.
yeah.
Um, but I would just say in general, like parting words for humans, like just like open your eyes to all of the possibilities. Look for the feathers when you're walking or like whatever, because I think that those little tiny moments, those increments are like really the important stuff that we need to pay attention to and tap into.
I agree 100%. So, well, beautiful. Well, maybe someday you'll have to come back and we'll talk again, and then you can
Oh, and
plug.
I'm the plug, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
Wait till I get a job and then we can do that. And I officially have the degree and can like literally say like I'm
yeah,
a master in social work. Because I can't quit yet.
yeah. Well, this has been a great joy. I really appreciate you doing this with me. And yeah, all the best on finishing your studies and starting that journey. That's beautiful, and I'm excited for you.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I'll be
Long
Yeah, good for you. And I'm glad, just from talking to you here, I'm glad there's folk like you out there doing that work and are there for people who need it. So
Really lovely. Thank you.
awesome. Well, maybe we'll do it again sometime. Thanks so much again. I'm going to hit stop here, and I can officially say bye to you on the other end, but take
All right.
care. All right. Bye-bye.